Hi, Volha. I was writing an email, but I think this will be a lot quicker and hopefully give better explanations if I just talk this through. So let me go through this here. Constants and args, I hope I fixed. I did check this, and it seems like things are basically there. The one thing I might have, not an objection to, but this could be slightly questionable, is they are not private, and it seems I don't know if they're used elsewhere, but I haven't checked on the code base, but if they are not used elsewhere, then they should be private. Obviously, with encapsulation, we always try and put things at the lowest level of access possible. Okay, question 2. Yes, many questions here. Main point of influencing thread safety, so I tried to avoid it. So I try to avoid static in one place. Static for file. Okay, how do you decide where to use static and where to avoid it? Okay, so where to use static. Generally, we try and use static methods if we don't need an instance of a class. So for example, in your, which one was it? The writing, I think. Yes. So in the CSV file writer, this method here does not depend on any external state in the class. And we don't create lots of different CSV file writers, right? We don't create a CSV file writer and specify a path in some sort of object, and then we don't perform multiple operations on that one bundle of data. So I'll just get up the... So for example, if I was going to create a new file writer with, new file, whatever, and inside this I have this, file.txt, then so this would make sense if I were then to do filewriter.set, I don't know, set line skip or whatever, set line skip 10 filewriter.set. So I'm setting state of this object, right? I'm setting the state of the file writer, and I'm setting set quotation ignore true, right? Because then I'm storing all of this state, this true and this for quotation ignore and this line skip in this one file writer object. So if I don't need any of that, because this is obviously used in the operations, these items, and if I don't use any of that, and it's just a case of here we just pass in these variables, and then we write them, and then it prints somewhere else. There's no need to create a new CSV writer, because in our instance we're always writing to the same place. So for example here, even if I were to just do this, I'm referring to a specific file writer, right? Because it doesn't know what I'm going to do with this. Like with this I could do fw dot write new line. This is all made up, of course, but write new line abc, and then I could also have file writer file. And that these are completely different, because these are accessing different files. They have different state. But if we're always writing to the same file, I could just do something like file writer dot write, because then I don't need to specify any of this state. And you could make the argument, yeah, why don't you just specify file.txt and then content and then, but at this point it's kind of a bit more awkward, because then we're passing in the state, right? Whereas here we don't use this more than once. It's just we write it and then it's done. So it's a good case to use it when we don't want to instantiate an object. Now this is probably getting a bit too technical, but Java uses something called like automatic garbage collection, and when we create a new file writer, we're adding this object into what we call a heap, the heap basically, which is a collection of Java objects that are in memory and have memory allocated to them. I can send you links about this if you're interested, just let me know. And when we do this and then we store it, file rotor, this item stays in memory until the Java, it's called the garbage collector, will check, okay, are we still using this? Can we free this bit of memory? And so with a static method, we don't need to worry about that because we're just statically calling, we're not creating any instance, we're just writing. And then once the write is complete, there's no state left over. There are some issues with static instantiation. These are more sort of complicated issues. I don't know if I can go into them, but I guess I'll briefly go over this over the next 10 seconds. If it's too complicated, sort of don't worry. But basically, if I have like a file writer here, it's a class. And then I have static item object file new file. Now what we do with static fields is the class will sort of, on the initial load, the class loader will try and run this. So it can lead to some very confusing errors because you say, okay, my program's not loading, but I don't know why, and it's because static fields, or I don't know if they're technically fields, but static variables are instantiated straight away. They're like, this isn't handled anywhere. It's not like you're handling it under a try-catch. It's just, so that's one of the places you want to avoid static. And yes, in Fredsafe, they're awesome. But again, I think this is maybe something we should worry about later on rather than getting into overly specifics nowadays. So I think a general rule of thumb is what we talked about. Is if you don't need to instantiate an object, and if it doesn't have any state, then you can use a static method. Otherwise, try and instantiate it and keep that state stored in an object. Okay, next question. List of company country. So far, we'll leave it as an array because you are not sure. I say this. List of company. Yeah, so this was, again, some people would use list of company country, but for me, if I am already saying that it's a list here, that's already specified in the code. If we think of the code as a kind of way of documenting what's going on, then we're already saying that this is a list, so we don't need to say list of, in my opinion. And then if we get rid of that, it's not really a company country, it's more like, I agree with the group by name wasn't 100% accurate, because at the time of we create it, it's not a group by. It's just the company countries. But it's not really company countries, because this isn't really company countries. This is just like company red rows, something like this, right? And then when we sort them, again, this is kind of pseudocode, right? Then this can become, I know this isn't how collections.sort works, but so companies grouped by country, right? Because after it's sorted, that's when it becomes this, because then England, Scotland, right, these are grouped by, right? That's kind of, they are grouped by the country. And this is kind of what I wanted to get back to, was, okay, oh yeah, sorry, I just got one of your texts there. What I wanted to get back to is this idea of using maps, and I think this comes in a later question as well. So I didn't go through the whole example, but I am definitely sure that using a map is much clearer here and sort of will make things easier for people to understand, because even company red rows, I don't really know what that means, but if we were to go back and have this map country and then set string and then call this country companies, I think that's a lot better because here we see country companies. Okay, someone's coming in, they're reading the code for the first time. Company countries, okay, they can look, they can see it's a map. So I'll just draw out like a basic, what this map could look like. This isn't an instantiation, but you know, it's just an instance. So in here, then we have sort of A, B, following our earlier example. Then we have Scotland, C. So I think I remember you talking about this as well. You say, actually, I read something about them. I just thought I really wanted to, but the situation, the code country is not unique. Cannot be null. Stopped me. Okay, so it's not unique exactly, and this is why it's great. And the reason why it's great is because it's not unique. So instead of having, so here's how we'd represent it in a list, right? We'd have have a list. So this is a list here. Let me just full screen this. So this is our list item 1, and it looks like this. We have England A, and we have England B, and then we have Scotland C. So that's how it's being stored currently. I'll just add some quotation marks to this to make it. So if we were to have it in a map, and we can ignore this country enum for now, but that is something I think we should get to eventually, then this is how it would look. Not in, again, hopefully this is like JSON, hopefully this visualizes, you can sort of get the idea here. So here we have a key England, and then we have a key Scotland, right? So in this set we have 2 key England, so this is what you're talking about. You're saying, oh, it doesn't work because there's multiple keys, but that's the great part about it, is because we don't need to duplicate these keys, because what we're doing is when we put B in here, we already know what it is, right? So if we were to add D, a third country, and this was also England, we wouldn't need to add England here, you know, as a new key, because maps ensure unique keys, right? So what we could just do is we can represent the same data by adding C. So now whereas if we were to add it here, then we have to add another column, England, it needs to be D, not C. Yeah, so you can kind of see the benefit of this approach in terms of it's very clear. And then if I want to get all of my England, so when I'm writing it, when I want to get all of my England sets here, I can just do, you know, what do I call this map? Country codes, country companies rather, dot get, then England, and then its result would look like this, right? So then I've immediately got all of my unique companies, whereas if I did that here, it would be companies, you know, then I have to do a loop and I have to filter through if name is England, then print, you know, so company countries dot for actually it's actually even more list string so if row dot get, then you have to, you know, 0 dot equals, and this is not null safe as well, you know, this is very likely to, if one of these doesn't have an item and then we do an equals, then it's going to be look like, you know, null dot equals, and that'll throw a null pointer, so we don't want that as well. That's why it's also worse. If equals England, then, you know, print, I know again this is kind of pseudocodey, row get 0, whereas here we can just do print this, right? So does that make sense why I think this is much better? over this. I should actually add the explicit. Country companies. Yeah, so it's just more work and it's more kind of confusing. Whereas here, you could do that, you know. But so but this is why I prefer this way, because and then you don't even have to sort it, right? I mean, you have to sort the keys, but you don't have to sort anything else, because let's say we had, you know. Sorry if this is too extended, but hopefully this is being useful for you. So if we had, they're both 1,000 lines long, and this is pretty realistic, because if I, let me just quickly give an example of some keeping it faithful to real life. Just get SSH into one of my servers. So this is the same file format as what we were talking about. So I'm just finding out how long this file is. Okay, so this is how long it is. Almost 1 million rows. Okay, so this might not seem super significant in terms of our example, but let's say this was 85,000 rows long. Well, the 85,000 records, right? This is all, so that's 85,000 records, and this is 85,000 records. We see here companies.length, or size rather. See that? Now that equals exactly 85,000, right? Whereas this, I don't know the exact number for this, but here will equal how many countries there are. So let's say in here, this database, there's 80 countries, so 80, right? And then instead of sorting 85,000 rows, we're sorting 80 rows, because we only have to sort the keys. Whereas in this one, we have to sort every item. Anyway, I won't go on this example too long, because I'm kind of rambling now. What would be better if your name was? My name is not perfect. Countries are not grouped here. Yes, I kind of agree with that. That was a temporary thought up name, so they were not yet grouped. I agree with that. Is company sorted by country? List of string. See, I don't think list of. Yeah, again, I don't know if I like that. Some people do use this, so this isn't entirely like factually and objective, but I don't like the idea of using list of company country rather than just company country. But yeah, the naming isn't an enormous issue. It's more the data structure issue. Company country is better, or company countries, or country companies, which is I think what I call it. So. But the thing is when this is represented as a list, this could be anything, right? Like if we had no idea about the program and you were to read this, you would say, oh, I have not, no, you know, you'd be like, okay, there's countries and companies, but I don't know how they're stored. Whereas when we store them like this, country companies, then maybe you don't know exactly what's where, but you know either this is a country or these are countries. Right, and also if we were to add the enum, like I would really like to, which is I can send you a link for that as well. Then we know exactly what's going on. So if this is called country companies, we see okay, that's the country, these are the companies. Boom, it's done. Okay, going on. About maps, I read something about them. I use hash tables, and I really wanted to use them here. It's not unique. I think I explained this. I'll go over it again quickly. The situation is that the country code is not unique and can be null. Like if it can be null, then what we should do here is when we're fetching the countries, so I'll clear up this example. So fetch So during fetching, during fetch. So read row, string row, let's read row. Then it's row, I can't remember, I think it was 8, right? So I just country index equals so in this situation, you're saying that if because the country here can be null, I know that's true, right? So, well, I don't think it's null, I think it would actually be empty, so it would look like this, right? So in the circumstance where it is empty, like this, then you're saying we can't add null as a key to a map, which is correct. What we can do is if country dot is equal to null, or country is empty, then we can, country companies add put. So that's how you use a map. Yeah, maybe you're somewhat familiar, but this is the key here. The first one is the key, and the second one is the value. So we could say no country, and then whatever our value is. Name, and then else. Or actually, we could even do this to make this a bit nicer. Country. So this is actually a bit messy, because what we could do here is we could actually just say if country name is null, then country equals no country. Then we can get rid of this. Just do this. So this way the map will still be filled, and all the no countries will be grouped together, or you can call this whatever, obviously. But again, this should be specified. If I'm following good practice, what we should really do here is then create, up the top of the class, we should create static final string, country. Well, this should be in the I don't know if you're familiar with enums, but I'll come back to that, and for now I'll just use this. So no country equals no country. These are called magic strings, and we always try and avoid magic strings, because if we change this one, for example, if I change that here, and then later on in the program I want to do if country equals no country, but then later on up here I decide to change this to not found, then this isn't changed, and this might lead to an error because we forget to change it here, but it's still changed here. So instead we would just use no country in both of these examples. Okay. And so that fixes the issue with there's no null, if there's a null found, rather. It's not very easy for access a company. Companies, without companies, etc. It's not very well. This is the thing: is in our example, this is the thing about using a collection, is you choose a collection that is suited to your example. So in our example, we never actually check an individual company, because I agree, if we want to find an individual company name, it's very difficult to do that in our circumstance. Because how do you check? Then you have to go through each iterator on. I mean, it's not easy either way, because I'm not going to write out code here to save time. But so with list of list string, we have to go for over the list, and then for inner list if company right? Whereas using the map country set string, we have to go for key map for string set if company equals search. So that's not great in this example, right? Because we still have to go through the same items. So I agree there. But the whole process of choosing a collection, now this is very important. This is a lot of what they ask in interview questions, because the data collections will dictate a lot about the efficiency and the ease of use of a program. So in our example, we never actually search for a specific company. All we do is we read all of the companies and then we write all of the companies. So we don't need to search for an individual company. So it's not an issue in our example. About maps, hash thread save. What would you say? I think map is definitely, as I've said, I think map is definitely better. Lambda, I've just copied your string. Does comparator comparing item to get 0 sort companies also? I think this is what I suggested, and I think it does, because yes, item. This will also, actually, it can be even simpler. It can be like this. And yes, this will also, because if I expand that out, I don't know if I can go back here. History. Just go back to this. You see all I did here was, like, this is the same thing you're doing, right? Is 0102. And what we're doing here is kind of the collections.sort lambda. They try and make it as simple as possible, so a lot of this stuff is implicit. Now I know this will be a little bit difficult to understand, but we see that this is the same. So this is the same as this. When we see this gray, it's can be replaced by lambda. Now what this means is that the anonymous inner class here is exactly the same as a lambda. They have exactly the same functional effect. So when I run that, it's exactly the same. There's no change in how the only change is how we see the source code. There's no change in terms of how it's ran. And then we see the same thing here. We see it can be replaced with comparator.comparing. So then what we do here is we can do that again, alt replace, and then you can actually just read this, because this is what we're doing here, is accepts a function that extracts a comparable sort key from type T and returns a comparator T. It compares by the sort key. The return comparator is serializable if specified. The function is also serializable. So you can actually do a deeper dive into this if you want and see how this works. I wouldn't recommend it. I don't know if we need to get in that level of detail now, but we're actually seeing here that it's just doing the same comparison. It's just doing a compare to of C1 and C2. Those are the two parameters here. So yeah, so they come out of the key extractor. So you see this is another, they're declared here, blah, blah, blah. I think it's overly complicated, but yes, it's doing the same thing. And I think it just looks a lot neater. So we can go into lambdas at some point. I think we should probably do a whole thing on lambdas, because lambdas were, at least the time I've been working with Java, they've been like the biggest single expansion where they added all these amazing sort of functional programming techniques that just make things a lot easier. So I think that's very cool, and we can go into that. But right now, it might be a little bit too much at once, considering I think we should just focus on collections for now, and then we can move on to that a little bit later. I hope this was helpful. I'm ending it now.